Go.
Thanks, Sammy. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's sports section of Channel 12 News at 10. Tonight is a special night you do not want to miss. Tonight, we are going to remember all the great things that happened in this decade. This decade was made of lots of different streaks by teams. Some streaks were made, some streaks were ended. One of the most famous streaks was of the UCLA Bruins men's basketball team. After losing to Notre Dame, they went on to win 88 straight games. And after that, after their 88th game, they lost again to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. In the beginning of this decade, Terry Sawchuk of the New York Rangers had his 103rd career shutout victory versus the Pittsburgh Penguins when they defeated them 6-0. He is the only goalie to ever have more than 100 career shutouts. Now moving on to the best teams in the 1970s. First, we'll start with the National Football League, otherwise known as the NFL. The NFL in the 1970s was mostly dominated by the Pittsburgh Steelers under coach Chuck Noll. They were led a lot by the Steel Curtain, which was 4 defensive linemen that were considered the backbone of the Steelers. It consisted of Charles Edward Green, otherwise known as Mean Joe. He was the Rookie of the Year and a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and made the 1970s Decades team, which was all the best players from the 1970s decade. Alongside of him on that team was L.C. Greenwood, and then there's 2 other players who were not on the Decade team but were also big contributors, were Ernie Holmes and Dwight White. Let's switch sports and talk about baseball. Major League Baseball, or the MLB, had no real standout team in the 1970s. There were 3 teams that all had their runs. First, in 1972, the Oakland Athletics won the first of 3 straight World Series, winning in 1972, 1973, and 1974. Then the Cincinnati Reds had enough of them winning, so they decided they were going to take their turn. They won 2 straight in 1975 and 1976. Then the always powerful and rich New York Yankees came into play and took the next 2 in 1977 and 1978. So as you can see, there's more than just one team that dominated in the 70s for baseball. Now switching sports to the hardwood, where the National Basketball Association, or the NBA, took place. It all started when the Milwaukee Bucks won the title in 1971 with their standout center Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He stayed in Milwaukee until 1975, and then he was acquired by the Los Angeles Lakers. It took him a while to get used to the team, so he didn't end up winning any titles in the 1970s. The NBA title was for grabs also throughout the 70s. There was only one team that won more than one title, and it was the Boston Celtics. They didn't win it back-to-back. They won it in 1974 and 1976. The other 8 titles were won by 8 different teams throughout the NBA. Let's stay on the hardwood, but switch to the collegiate level of men's basketball. NCAA men's Division I basketball in the 1970s had one definite standout that blew all the other teams out of the water. It was the UCLA Bruins, coached by John Wooden. Between 1970 and 1975, they won 4 out of the 5 titles, 4 straight from 1970 to 1973. They were good in the early 70s because of 4 terrific players. Starting off was Bill Walton. He was a center who played from 1971 to 1974. Sidney Wicks was a power forward who played from 1968 until 1971. Jamal Wilkes and Marquise Johnson were both small forwards. Jamal played from 1971 to 1974, and Marcus played from 1973 to 1977. Now to the worldwide sports. There were 4 Olympic Games in the 1970s, 2 in 1972, the winter and the summer, and 2 in 1976, also the winter and the summer. Bruce Jenner was the only Olympic decathlon of the 1976 Olympic Games. He was the first person to use his fame in the track field to get him money, wealth, and popularity. In the 1972 Olympics, American Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals at the 1972 Olympics for swimming. He set world records in several of his races. Also, in the 1976 Winter Olympics, ice dancing made its debut. In the Summer Olympics, in 1976, America had a surprise when 5 American boxers won gold medals. That's all for the sports. Now on to Brad Bunkelman with politics.